Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the final 26th edition. I'll explain here shortly. To my right, Mr. Jim Eichenhofer, Pelicans.com, radio analyst John DeShazier, and the man, the myth, the legend himself, Brother Martin's own Will Guillory, or a.k.a. The Athletics, Will Guillory. Gentlemen, how y'all doing?
Doing well. Appreciate y'all for having me on.
Well, all good, man. 26 games, 26 alphabet, so let's, can we fit a game into each letter?
And this is my first time getting to chill in the extra sweet set with you guys, so I'm feeling real special right now. I got all the extra effects and everything going on.
And I think this is the first time we've had these two guys on as a combination of guests, so this is going to be really fun. I'm really looking forward to this. By the way, do you tell people first that you're from The Athletic or from Brother Martin?
Yeah.
Oh, Brother Martin first, always. When I introduce myself, that's the first thing I say.
That's how it works. If you're from New Orleans, if you know, you know. It's hard to believe, gentlemen, that we are here post NBA All-Star break. 26 games remain in the season. And it's interesting because when I just think big picture, a team that's not probably going to be in the postseason, but it matters. I think these 26, there's a lot to talk about on that. So let's just kind of start here, Will, with you. Overall, big picture, just when you look at the final 26, do you have goals? What do you want to see from this team? What are you paying attention to when you cover the Pelicans, the final 26 games of the season?
I mean, anytime you're having a discussion about the Pelicans, the first thing you got to say whenever these discussions come up, you want to see guys stay healthy. I think that's the big thing over the past couple of weeks. We've been able to see them have a full, healthy lineup. Zion's, I believe, up to 29 consecutive games healthy in the lineup. Not worried about minutes in the starting lineup. You want to see that continue, him continue to be productive. You see him picking things up on the defensive end. You just want to see him continue to progress with that. And also just them continuing to figure out just how these lineups work, having, Trey Zion and Queen out there. Or they continue to playing big with Herb at the point guard. You just want your guys out there so they can see what it look like, continue to build. Because every year we kind of go into the summer saying, what do you think it'll look like when these guys play? We're seeing these guys play together now, so you want to see them continue to have these moments on the floor together where they can learn and grow together.
Yeah. I'm going team. At first I was thinking, 26 games, just go 500, 13-13. Then, on the radio broadcast game last night, me and Graf got a little greedy, and we said 30 wins, which would mean 15-11.
Right.
And, for a team that has not played 500 ball, that's kind of ambitious.
Yeah.
But I want to be greedy. I want to push the envelope a little bit. I do want to see if they can get to 15-11 because, as Will said, these guys have been together. They have been healthy. And so they should have a nice feel for one another. We've seen some flashes of what this team can do, especially defensively, even though they let go of the rope, a couple of those road games. But we've seen some flashes of what they can do defensively. And if you can defend in the NBA, you can win games. You might not be able to make shots all the time, but you can win games. I just want to see, 15-11, again, might be a little ambitious, but I want to see above 500. I just want to see this team finish out with a good kick.
My goal is maybe more of a spirited, emotional take. Maybe this is not surprising coming from me, but one of my biggest things overall is I want them to emphatically demonstrate that they don't belong in the same conversation with some of the teams that are at the bottom of the standings.
I like that.
I noticed during the trade deadline, all the different podcasts and different TV shows that you listened to or watched, that you heard a lot of talk about, okay, here's the bottom teams, the Pelicans and these other teams, and it kind of hurt me a little bit to hear that. So I want to see what happened right before the All-Star break, the game against Sacramento, where they just beat them down and they won emphatically. Just to show that you shouldn't be mentioned in that group of teams, that there's a bunch of teams that are at the bottom and maybe you're not a bottom 5 team. I feel like with the talent that they have, it feels doable that you could separate yourself from that pack of teams. I mean, some of these teams at the bottom of the standings too, like Washington, is in a totally different mode in terms of trying to win now compared to what you're doing. So that's my biggest goal for the last 26 games, is just to show that by the end of the season, have it be clear that you shouldn't be mentioned among some of these teams that are in that stratosphere.
Yeah, that take race is going to be crowded there at the bottom. There's going to be a lot of teams chasing those top 3 picks. And you're right, the Pelicans don't have a reason to be a part of that group. Mm-hmm. So you want to, like you did last night, bank some of these easy wins against teams that don't want to win, because it's probably going to be like 8 or 9 of them down the stretch, teams that are trying to lose games, which is crazy. So you got to be able to win those games when you have opportunities to.
Yeah, I think to me, It's simple. I mean, my goal for the final 26, show me who you are in 27, 28 for the next season, or 26, 27 rather, in that it leads to my next topic, the importance of how many wins you get, to John's point, in the final 26. There are jobs on the line, not just the staff, but I think players here as well. If I'm front office, if I'm the fan base, if I'm everyone on this table, who's my team? Who's my core? What am I doing? I mean, there's so much talk this year as to what's your foundation, who's your base, what players you're moving from or trying to bring in. I can't figure that out if I don't know what I have. So you brought up, the amount of games that Zion's played in a row and all these different aspects of it. I need to find out who I am going into this summer. So to me, that is my overall goal. Who are the New Orleans Pelicans? And I think it leads into our next one, the importance of winning games in those 26.
Oh, for sure. I think you got to continue to be competitive. You got to. I think we've heard James Borrego talk a lot about them really executing in clutch situations. I think that's something they've really focused on. They've been in a lot of these games where it's close at the end and they let it slip away, and they've shown some improvement. But you got to continue to get better. You got to establish. I think the hierarchy is something that they're really working on figuring out in these situations. Who's the guy we're going to? Who's the number one? Who's the number two? Who can we really rely on in those situations to get a good shot that we can run offense through? You've seen, in particular, at Minnesota games, Zion hitting a big shot there at the end. I think you want to see him really step into that role and be a guy who you can trust at the end of games. And I don't know if it's too soon yet for us to talk about this, fellas, but this team did lose Jose Alvarado, and they got to figure out who's the heart of this team. Where's that toughness going to come from? Where's that fire going to come from? Because Jose has provided it so often for this team throughout the years, and he's not going to be there anymore. So they got to figure out who's going to be that guy when it's time to, get in a fight with a 7-footer. They can't look to Jose anymore. So who's going to be that guy? Every team needs, I always say, you need a team full of guys who want to play basketball, and sometimes you need a guy who don't want to play basketball anymore. And I'm here to throw hands, and Jose was that guy. You need to figure out who's going to be that guy for you now, because Jose's not here anymore. Najee's not here anymore. You got to figure out where that toughness is going to come from with this group.
I like this man. 'Cause, I always said, I like tough guys, but your toughest guy, it's hard for your toughest guy to be, 5'11". So you need a big dude who's kind of, not beef stew kind of enforcement, but a guy who just ain't going to take no stuff. But how important is it to win? It's always important to win games because you want to finish out this season with a good taste in your mouth. This team has had a bad taste in its mouth for too long. So you finish out on a positive note, and momentum doesn't go into the next season, but you do establish, I think, which guys you feel comfortable with, which guys you can depend on. And look, you can say what you want to say. The film don't lie. It ain't going to lie. And we're talking about guys auditioning for jobs, guys who are going out there, whether it's, James Borrego coaching this team or whether it's, Gus Kattengell coaching this team. It doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly. We're trying to win, right? So, but whoever is coaching this team, you got to figure out what's on your roster. This is a good 26-game span where you can figure out a lot of things about who you trust, what positions you want to put guys in. You add in DeJounte Murray. Hopefully he can fit back in, but that remains to be seen. But you find out a lot about the guys that you have. And so, along the way, you want to win some games, man. We've lost enough around here. Mm-hmm. And you want to get that feeling of enthusiasm and hope and fans saying, okay, that's a product I want to see. And guys in the locker room saying, we like this all because, how many years did we hear this team say, we want to run? Mm-hmm. How many? But they never ran. Now you got a team that will play that pace. And so, you're kind of figuring some things out. And I want to see it come to fruition down the stretch where you do win those games. You are in those clutch situations. And you figured out, okay, this is our 1, this is our 1A, this is our 1B. Okay, if he doesn't have it going, we can go to this guy. But you want to figure out who can operate in those tight spaces, because when the game gets compressed and the defenses become tougher and the officials swallow the whistle a little bit more, who can play through that and get you what you need to get offensively, especially.
In terms of the importance of how important it is to win as many games as possible the rest of the season or the last 26, to me, I think there will be some extenuating circumstances or other factors that you can't directly say, okay, this record means they won't make this many changes. But I definitely think that there will be some correlation to your guys' point about that jobs are at stake. That if you finish the last 26 games with a really good record, I think you can say, okay, maybe there's a little bit more like tweaks that need to be made. Whereas if you finish really poorly, I don't know how you can go into it and say like, yeah, we love what we did in the last 2 months of the season. So, but I mean, I have a three-pronged thing about the importance of the last 26 games in terms of winning, and these are kind of varying degrees of how doable they are. I mean, first I have finished with more than 21 wins. That's what you had last season. I think that's something that is very realistic that you should be able to do to at least show that you didn't take a step back winning-wise over 82 games. Play 500 or better over the last 26 games. I think that's important. And then lastly, ruin as many teams as possible March and April. So those are my three things that I want to see.
I love that. I think one of the things that stands out to me, and I don't know if I've expressed this to y'all individually, but I did on the broadcast, along the lines of finding your identity where you want to go. I think we're going to look back, and I still kind of do right now, at that OKC game. I felt like it was enough. I felt like that team didn't get bullied by OKC. They didn't win, but I felt that was the first time it was as competitive as they've played that team. And, John, as you were just talking about, hey, we've lost enough here, we forget OKC was in that tanking, kind of thing. And then eventually went with their group that they're going to go with, and they threw them out on the court. They lost with them. And eventually they found a way to win. And now we see where OKC is now. I'm not saying that's what the Pels are going to be, but maybe these 26 and what we're seeing in the last couple of weeks, we're seeing that a little bit, right? Like, they didn't want to get bullied. Sadiq Bey standing up. Jeremiah Fears getting fined standing up. I don't know if that helped or not in Minnesota, where there were a lot of whistles for, the T-Wolves were being allowed to be way more physical than the Pels did. But, John, they played through that, and they wound up winning that game. So maybe it's seeds that sprout a tougher, I'm done losing mentality team with a core group of guys that you can move forward into next year.
Well, thing that helps the most, we'll mention, availability. Dude's got to be available. You can be as willing as you want to, but if you're missing Zion Williamson and you're missing Herb Jones and you're missing Trey Murphy, hey, you want to, but it's not really a reality. It's not feasible because you're missing your best players. But if those guys are available, now you got something to stand on. Now you can, the biggest thing about OKC, they got all their dudes are playing. Always, it feels like. Shea is available. Seems like always. They've got guys now, they're having some injury issues this season, and you notice it big time, but they were on pace to set an NBA, a single season record for wins. And then guys got nicked up and those kinds of things. But when guys are available, then you can make some boasts. You can feel some kind of way about things because you're saying, okay, we got our dues, and you know what? We match up with you. We might not be perfectly matched up, but as much as we got to stop you, you got to stop us. You can say that when you guys are available.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another thing I really love to see with this team is your young guys, Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen. We talked about them so much this year, just kind of hitting their stride during the second half of the season. I think, in particular with Queen, I think you kind of seen him hitting a little bit of that rookie wall where a lot of these young guys, they've never played this many games before in their life and dealing with the schedule. And with Queen in particular being a starter every night, dealing with all of these veteran centers getting banged up, I want to see those guys come back after a break and really, sprint to the finish line. And I think in particular, just being able to finish games with Derek Queen is something I think I really want to see more often, where I think a lot of these games, you're really excited to see Yves Missi come in and bring a defensive presence, and that's been a big part of them being able to close out some of these games. But you want to see Queen bring some of that as well. You want to be able to rely on him in certain moments and say, we can leave Derek Queen out there and still feel like we can have a defensive unit, because at the end of the day, he's going to be the center of the future. When you're looking to win big games 2-3 years from now, you want to be able to do it with Derek Queen being on the court. And I want to see him kind of take on that challenge more often, to be able to defend some guys one-on-one, not be a target in certain pick-and-roll situations where it's not, hey, we could play Yves Missi if he's playing well, but we don't need to play Yves Missi because we got to hide Derek Queen. And I think you want to see that more often down the stretch.
I think the part of the OKC analogy or comparison that I like the most is that people saw when they jumped from a middle, like 45 win team to obviously the championship team that they became. But a huge step in that was going from the 20 wins that they were getting for multiple years to a play-in team. I mean, that was just as significant as, and I think I just want the Pelicans to have something tangible that they can point to from the last couple months of the season of saying, maybe these weren't the most intense, heated games because there wasn't playoffs at stake, but you have to make the jump. And even specifically to your point about the rookies or Derek Queen, just what they're doing translating into wins, I think is something that would be very encouraging going into the summer.
Yeah, and if you play playoff teams and you beat them, that shows me something. And if you're playing teams that aren't trying to win, do what you did to Sacramento. I mean, that's the same thing, kind of shows me the same thing. When you look at games out of the 26, is there any, Jim, that stand out to you that you really would love to? Look at that smile. Look at that smile. He has one on his head. What you got?
Usually when I smile like this, you're expecting me to say the game against the Lakers.
Absolutely, yes.
But I'm going to throw a little.
I have the streamer still in my office, if you like. The victory streamers from
crypto.com.
Yes.
But no, I'm actually going to throw a curveball. I pinpointed March 24th at New York because it's the game against Jose Alvarado. So I think that'll be really fun. It'll be interesting just to see them go against him. So that's the game. There's a bunch of home games that I could look at as well, but I think that one specifically stood out to me.
Yeah. I cheated. I picked 2 games because hey, that's what I do. Home game April 5th against Orlando, because Orlando kicks you around repeatedly, regularly for years. And so that is a team that I think that's where you want to draw a line and say, okay, we ain't going to take it anymore from you. And at some point, you have to draw a line. Even when the team's got your number, you got to, at some point, you can't let them continue to kick sand in your face. You got to do something about it. And Orlando's been kicking more than sand in this team's face. They've just been bullying this team around with their length, with their physicality. It's been a dominant streak. And it's one of those things where you see them coming and you're like, oh, here they come. Because you don't feel like anything can be done. I want to see them stand up to that team. To a lesser degree, March 21st, home, Saturday against Cleveland. Another team that's kind of had your number and kind of, done. I want to see them kind of, those teams that have been wrecking you, I want to see them stand up and say, okay, we might get wrecked by somebody else, but it ain't going to be you anymore. Somebody, because, there's always horses for courses. There's always a thing. This year, it's San Antonio that's beating the smack out of OKC, and nothing OKC can seem to do about it. There's going to be that team. But at some point, you got to say, okay, it ain't going to be you. We've had enough from you.
Yeah, and the game I picked was February 26th at Utah. And you might say they played at Utah again on February 28th. Why'd you pick that one? Well, February 26th is my birthday. So that's the reason I picked that one. But no, I think Utah is a really interesting matchup for this team. And it kind of to John's point, I think them having this new front line with Jaren Jackson, Lauri Markkanen, and Yusuf Nurkic, I want to see the Pelicans against these big, tough teams. I think you're seeing more of that around the NBA. Teams sizing up, teams playing multiple bigs. Utah's apparently playing 3 bigs now. They're going to do 3 big lineups. We'll see how that works. But I want to see the Pelicans really deal with teams that want to be bigger than them, that want to push them around in the paint, like the Orlandos, like the Clevelands in the past. And I think Utah, though, that 2-game kind of baseball trip they have in Utah, how they kind of deal with that. Now, Utah, they've been finishing games, basically sitting all their best players in the fourth quarter, so we'll see how that goes. But I really want to see how the Pelicans respond to some of these teams that want to be big, that want to be tough, because they're playing, relatively smaller lineups. They're not doing a whole lot of Queen and Misi together like they were at certain points during the season. So I want to see how they respond in those matchups and being able to just deal with the physicality of some teams. Because I think we've said it before, when this team is out and running and you can get Trey in transition, you can get Zion in transition, they look really good. But when the game slows down and you got to be gritty, you got to be tough, they got to be better in those situations. And I think that's why that Minnesota win the other day was so big, because Minnesota's another team that loves to play big. They want to push you around with Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle in the paint, and the Pelicans responded really well in that situation and came out with the win in the end. And I think you want to see more of that down the stretch.
By the way, John, when you were talking about how teams match up with certain teams, it just made me realize, as you were talking about OKC versus the Spurs, that the Pelicans have played the Spurs better than OKC has, which is kind of mind-boggling if you think about it as well. But, I mean, all 4 games against the Pelicans won one of them, but all 4 games were close. So
Well, Zeke cooks Wemby. That's why. That's the main thing.
incredible.
He's able to cook Wemby, and that kind of balances the scales from there, because it's like, okay, if you can take that big dude out and get him out of the lane and bust him up, then you compromise them a great deal.
yeah.
Just in from the league, Mr. Silver would like me to remind you, Will, that it's just minutes for rookies in the fourth quarter that Utah is trying to get.
Player development.
Player development.
Player
That is
development.
that we took care of that. Thank you.
Yes.
For me, it's March 6th. Everything that you just said, but it's the Phoenix Suns. Because I still see Grayson Allen shooting a 3 the last time that they were there. And I still see Devin Booker being that team. I've referred to them throughout the season, is an example to me of how to put a roster together that sort of fits with players around one another. You got guys like Grayson Allen, who I think just went Nancy Kerrigan, his knee. I mean, you got guys that are just, they're going to get under your skin, and you add Dylan Brooks. That roster is made for some of those players. So to your point, the bullying, the threes, they're always shoving you, trying to get a shot off, and it just that game. If the Pels can go on the road and win that game, that's going to make me a happy Gussie. Because that was such a. Guard him. He's open for 3. I mean, he set a franchise record in Grayson Allen. And Booker's a closer. We saw that here when they were here. Just that team is a team that I would just love to see the Pelicans beat.
Yeah, he slathered himself in invisible cream or something, I guess. And they couldn't find him. I don't know what happened. I mean, after he makes like 5, 6 of them, it's like, okay, you might want
to guard him.
to trail him or something. But yeah, I can see that. I would want to beat them just because of Dylan Brooks, because Dylan Brooks is just aggravating. I would love to have him on this team. Is that tampering?
I still remember, Booker grabbing C.J. McCollum's jersey, and I just, and no technical foul being
But I mean,
called.
if the line is here,
Yeah.
then Dylan Brooks is like here.
Sure.
And we mentioned Jose.
perpetually.
We mentioned Jose earlier. Remember last time these two teams played? There was a brawl on the court.
Yeah, like I said, that team to me is just something else. Got about 5 minutes here, fellas. To wrap up just what we're looking at in 26, the final 26 games here. Will, is there anything that can happen that will change your big picture perspective as to where this team is going?
I mean, kind of repeating what I said earlier, just wanting to see more from these young guys. I think if you really see them starting to take off, I think you're going to start hearing discussions about, okay, what can Derek Queen be in year 2? What can Jeremiah Fears be in year 2? I think if they continue to have success with this bigger lineup, is Jeremiah Fears your starting point guard in year 2? Or are you going to continue to play this big style and have him coming off the bench? I think that's going to be a big question. Is just how much are we going to be anticipating those guys in year 2, and what kind of jump can we expect based on what they did at the end of year 1? I think it's going to be a big question.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by what happens with DeJounte Murray. I don't know how many games he's going to play. I don't know how well he's going to play. But if he plays well, then I start looking at this team maybe a little bit differently, because, I know this team is playing kind of positionless basketball. You don't have a true point or whatever. Well, he's kind of a point. And if you got somebody who can direct these things and kind of get guys in positions, and a guy who's, again, unafraid in clutch situations to take a shot. He's unafraid to fail. He's unafraid to succeed. He wants the ball in his hands. So if he's the DeJounte Murray that we think he is down this stretch, even if it might be a minimal games, I just want to see that out of him, because that will hopefully alleviate some questions. Now, Will saying Queen, man, that's a good one, because a young guy playing point guard in the NBA goes through some hard times. And we've seen some hard times from Jeremiah Fears. But we've also seen the fearless Jeremiah Fears. So you want to see if he can he's got such speed. Does he know when to throttle down? Does he know how to use it? And mainly, does he finish at the rim, man? Does he finish at the rim? Because he can get there. But getting there and finishing is 2 totally different things. And we've just seen some situations where he just hadn't been able to finish.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would say there probably isn't a ton in the last 26 games that can change my perspective overall about this season. I mean, this season is what it is. But I do think that, you guys both talked about the rookies. To me, as positive as those guys have been, we know from watching the NBA for a long time that a lot of guys make a huge jump from year 1 to year 2. So what can they show over the last 26 games that sets them up to be successful next season. And also, I think, too, DeJounte Murray is an example of this. There's several guys that we don't know 2 years from now what their position is going to be here. So what can they show over the last stretch of the season that changes or kind of maybe reshapes what our thought process is in terms of how they fit into the picture of the roster overall, whether it's even this offseason coming up or going forward down the line?
All right, hard to believe we've come to the end of this edition of the New Orleans Pelicans podcast, but it's the most important as General Manager Will Guillory now takes on over here.
Here we go.
All right, what do you want to see from your team in the final 26 as a general manager specifically, and what are you looking forward to maybe in summer?
It's something we talked about a bunch. Is just wanting to see your young guys really grow and improve, showing that they can have winning habits, doing stuff that can help you win games. And I think in particular, looking forward, it's one thing we've talked about for years, just wanting to get more volume three-point shooting on this team, being able to spread the floor, not having to depend so much on Trey Murphy to be your three-point shooter, wanting to get that space for Zion, get that space for Derek Queen. I think you probably need multiple guys coming in who are hitting three-pointers. And I think maybe just one more point guard, obviously not having Jose here. We don't know about the future with DeJounte and Jordan Poole, if those guys are going to be around. Just having more dependable point guard play. Listen, I love Herb Jones as a point guard. I want to get him as much playing time as possible, but I don't know if he's going to be the point guard of the future for this team. And Jeremiah Fears obviously has a great future at the point guard position, but you want to have more ball handlers, more guys who can create shots. So I think number one on the list and probably number two is three-point shooting for this team, but more just guys who can create off the dribble. I think is going to be big as well.
Thank you, Mr. Will Guillory, John DeShazier, and Jim Eichenhofer. I'm Gus Kattengell. We'll see you next time on the New Orleans Pelicans podcast.